Good afternoon, and I hope you all had a good lunch and ready to participate in the afternoon session. I think we have two speakers who will be joining us online, and the other three with me will be in person. I'm not going to introduce the speakers since the Master of Ceremony has already done that in view of the time constraint. I, as a moderator, am asked to provide each speaker with about 7 to 8 minutes of their presentation, and then probably after each 5 of the participants, speakers have finished their presentation, then we'll have a dialogue between the participants. And feel free to send your questions. I believe you can also send your questions through online so that then the MC can direct some of the questions to us. So without further ado, I will call Shazali Sulaiman, who is the resident partner of KPMG from Brunei Darussalam. Thank you very much for joining us virtually. And the floor is yours. Thank you.
Thank you, Dato. Can you hear me clearly over there? No problem? Okay. Just to reach what do you call it? Assalamualaikum and good afternoon, everyone. I was introduced as a lawyer. Just to correct, I'm not a lawyer. Heaven forbid, I'm an accountant. So just to correct that. I think it's quite a difficult session to start with after lunch, and obviously it must have been a good lunch since you've extended your lunch to about 2:30. But when we look at post-pandemic, there's a lot of things that we need to really look at and what we have learned from this pandemic. And actually, is it really post-pandemic? We still have a pandemic going on, and I believe that we're going to live in a world where we'll be living with one sort of pandemic or a global crisis as we go along. We have now the monkeypox. You never know what's going to develop. In the UK, there's 148 new cases today. Malaysia, I'm not sure. If it starts to grow, then there'll be another, pandemic. The Ukraine war, Russian war has also caused a lot of disruption. And without any war, when the two big mighty giants of China and Russia and China and Russia starts fighting, a lot of people get trampled in between. So, there's a lot of things that we still need to consider in terms of the corporate world. Quite interesting, when I was walking to my office on my Facebook, I was prompted to watch Undercover Boss. And I'm sure you have watched Undercover Boss. And one of the most important things that I learned from Undercover Boss is sometimes bosses don't actually understand their employees, they don't understand their own business. And one of the key things that I learned when I was part of KPMG is when you start an audit is you need to understand the business. If you do not understand business, then you do not actually know how to approach an audit. And likewise, when you're a corporate leader, when you're a leader of a company, if you don't understand the functions of each of the department, each of the personnel within the organization, then you're really not a true leader. The leader sometimes needs to step back and see what other people within the organization are doing. And I think with the pandemic, obviously with people working from home, and now we're slowly coming back into the real world. There's a hybrid of working from home, working from the office. You need to manage now whether you have a hybrid or people, start coming back to the office. Do you really understand the health care of your employees? Do you understand the issues of your employees? Do you understand the internal controls and the problems of the companies? And in the post-pandemic world, and I think when you look at sustainability and corporate governance, it is important, I think, for leaders to realize that, yes, in order to get respect, you don't have, it's not because you're a leader, you get respect straight away, but I think you need to get respect from your employees. As much as customers are important to the business, employees are critical in the business. And if you do not understand the need of the employees, then it's a sure recipe for failure. And to me, I think the most important leadership is now for us to, turn back, look back, and reflect on our organization and ourselves, and to reflect on ourselves as to whether we really understand what's happening within the organization. Now, there are two types of companies that you look at in the post-pandemic. You have the multinational, resilient, be able to maybe cope with the pandemic. And of course, like in Brunei, we have MSME, medium, small, and medium enterprises. Now, a lot of MSMEs are still trying to survive. I think there's been a lot of failures, close downs. A lot of entrepreneurs have been, unfortunately, put in a very difficult position with the pandemic. And for those who have survived, the new norm of doing business is slightly different than when it was pre-pandemic. The cost of doing business, the cost of starting up a business is more expensive now. You have logistical problems, you have a lot of issues. You need to look for market. When companies are trying to protect their own industry by not allowing export or imports, then the supply chain also gets quite badly affected in terms of the new norm. And I think it's important for MSMEs to realize that, government cannot help. No government has deep pockets to be able to help. I mean, the pandemic has actually affected a lot of the sovereign wealth funds in countries that have sufficient funds that were able to help the SMEs. But if we have another pandemic, no government has deep pockets. So then it is going to be even more difficult, I think, to cope with any other pandemic that could come along. But I think what the pandemic has taught people is that we live in a world of great uncertainty. We don't know what's going to happen tomorrow. And SMEs do not try to survive for a month or 2 months' time. They try to survive each day. So we have a different perspective. And when you look at multinationals, obviously multinationals, we hope that they are resilient because they are the important driver of growth. They're an important industry that provides opportunities for MSMEs to supply chain. So it is important that government also ensure that multinationals do survive the pandemic, are able to provide as much assistance as they can in the move forward. But I think that one of the most important things, maybe a message I probably have for leaders is leaders have to be seen to be strong. They need to be transparent. Need to not show any weakness, because a weak leader will indicate that there is no direction within the organization. And if a leader is running around like a headless chicken, not help the organization. The organization will not be able to survive, because the employees then will not have respect for leaders. So a leader has to be strong, has to show that he or she can actually, President Aniko is a good friend, he or she can actually cope with the stress of a pandemic. And what else is there? The leader needs to have good vision, flexibility, be able to guide employees. And I think the other aspect, as I mentioned earlier, is the mental aspect of moving forward. It is no more about you are the employer, you're the employee. We need to understand employees' emotions. Pandemic can have a lot of impact, not only to employees, but to the family and to the wider group as well. Yeah? And I think my last point is on the pandemic is, yes, digitalization has grown exponentially. It's important. We have learned how to work remotely. We have learned how to embrace digitalization. But bear in mind that in a lot of countries, the digitalization gap, the digital gap has actually got wider. Because not everybody can actually afford to be connected. Not everybody can afford to actually have a laptop and be connected to the internet. And MSMEs that are not digitalized or not connected have actually moved even further backwards because of the pandemic. So I think digitalization, yes, is important moving forward, but I think we still need to understand that there is a wider gap because of this digitalization. And I think the poverty gap is actually getting bigger, to be honest, with the pandemic. And even though we will come out from this pandemic, but the startup for new SMEs, the resilience and the revitalization of SMEs that still survive will probably take much longer. So we are in for a tough time ahead moving forward. Thank you.
Thank you, Shazali. And the acoustics was not that fantastic. So we had a bit of a difficulty in getting the full impact
Right.
of your presentation, but we will reserve the questions to the end, and I will invite the next speaker, Professor Annie Ko from SMU, to give her presentation. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Are you all hearing me loud and clear? Is the acoustic better?
This is better, yeah, thank you.
Okay, thank you. A very warm good afternoon to the virtual audience. I think there are only about 16 of us virtually, and to the real audience. So my regrets for not being able to make it to KL. I've just returned from the World Economic Forum meetings, speaking in Davos. And I love the topic itself, actually, because I think in today's world, we should not have wasted a good pandemic. It's not a fantastic pandemic, but let's not waste the opportunity to transform and to recalibrate because of the pandemic. So I love it that your title is about corporate leadership and how corporate leaders can enhance sustainability and governance. So I'm going to take the letters of the ESG. I think E and S actually come very close together. And when I was in Davos, everyone reminded me that we have great Asian stories, and we do have. And so, like Shazali, I'm going to tell you 3 stories. And the 3 stories are essentially not big companies, but they understand the idea of innovation and collaboration. So I'm going to start with a small trading firm, Top International, and they have made Singapore their HQ for global trading. And they invited me to be one of the advisors beginning of 2021 when I stepped off and retired from SMU. And I love the idea that I'm helping a family-owned business grow to the next level. And Victor Tan, the CEO, he's second generation, and the family's originally from Malaysia. So I asked him for his vision, and he says, Prof, I am in trading, but some of my trading parts I'm not proud of, such as coal trading. So, but there are parts of the business which can allow me to transform. So when people use the word transformation, I tend to worry, because nobody can transform overnight from brown to green. So that's the E. You can actually transition. So I think today's world, we should be helping many of our companies think about the transition pathways. So what Top did was they cannot get rid of coal trading immediately because many households, many families, and many employees are very dependent on that part of it. But what they did was they invested in microgrids powered by solar, and they wanted to earn carbon credits to offset the brownness of the coal trading. But the real project that they are working on is they are moving from coal to bauxite. And I'm so proud that there's someone on our panel here that is part of the BRI. Because what they did in 2016 was they started trading bauxite in Guinea. And then 2018, they obtained their own concessions. And in 2019, they decided that with the consortium from China, Kimbo Port in Guinea government, and with Top, they decided to build an end-to-end, with a port so that they could bring the bauxite to the port. And it wasn't just for Top, it was for the community that is actually doing a lot of the mining. So I call this sustainability. And 2019, right smack during the COVID crisis, they actually built the port, keeping an eye on the marine life, and in their excavation and in their transformation, they make sure that it's sustainable. So it's easier to build sustainable projects if it's a new startup project, because you can ensure that it's green from the beginning. But it doesn't mean that if you are in a brown business right now, you cannot transition towards being green. You can get less brown, lighter green, and then darker green eventually. So the E is a very important part of our ESG. Second example, I'm sure many of you in the audience would know, HMI. So HMI is Healthcare Management International. I was the lead ID when they were listed in Singapore. And then about 4 years back, EQT Fund bought them and take them private. And I'm not going to talk about the business per se because they have 2 hospitals, which are in Mahkota, in Malacca, and Regency in Johor. But what I'm going to talk about is the S. I think many people in the audience will think that S means social. So all we have to do is to make sure that every year we do our CSR, and that would have ticked the boxes. I think just now Shazali mentioned that it's not about ticking boxes. It's about the passion and it's about the purpose of why are we in business as corporate leaders. So HMI actually set up a HMI Institute because without talent, no business is sustainable. So to me, the idea of social, it's about building sustainable human capital. And if you are in a business, you don't have an academy or you don't have in-house training and development, it's going to be very difficult for you to retain your current talent to help them transform towards being digital. You also cannot attract new talent who wants to have a career pathway with your company. So HMI Institute trained not just for the hospitals. They started training because in the pandemic, many people were staying at home and looking after their old, their aged, and their young. And they started realizing that many of their jobs, they don't have the purpose and passion. So the individuals started asking, where do I want to grow in my career for the next step? And they sign up for the courses. And I must say big thank you to my government in a way. And I'm sure Malaysia has similar schemes where there are vouchers for training. So they go through a conversion program. And there have been many articles where people in mid-career as financial consultant, by having helped their own family become healthy, by being a caregiver at home, they pivoted and they take on a new job. And those professional conversion program have given them a new lease in life, but has also given the healthcare industry possible recruitment of new talent. I'm going to go to the last one, which is G. I think a lot of people think that governance only comes in when you are a listed entity. In fact, when you're a listed entity, yes, governance comes in heavy. People like KPMG and Shazali will always be there. But I think governance is not rules-based. Governance is inside yourself. It's about principle-based. By having been an emeritus professor in the last year and a half, I have been advising many privately held companies and startups. And the first thing I always tell them is, I think you need an advisory committee or council, not governance council, in order to help you make things right at the very beginning. So I am advisory to a company that is in robotics and automation, and they have a presence in Penang. So PBA Group. The reason why they brought me in is because they are strategic investors. 2 strategic investors, one from Thailand, the Fraser's Property Group, and one from Hong Kong, the New World Property Group, invested in them. And once you have new investors in the company, they said, we want to make sure that there is governance, and we want to make sure that you have an independent director that is not from the family. So I was brought in, and while we don't have 4 quarterly meetings and it's not as onerous, it's actually very purposeful because they have to go through with us on their budget. And even 2 meetings a year was sufficient. But it also guided the thinking of where you want to build the business. So I'll end by saying ESG cannot be done in isolation. ESG can only be done when we collaborate with each other so that we work on trust. And I think that's a big item that in many of us in the audience, we are working towards. Second is you can't really be sustainable if you are not digital. And I think we all recognize that in the last 2.5 years, because of digital, we can start growing cashless, we start having transparency, which is what Shazali was pointing towards. And the last T is talent. You cannot build a corporate business to last for generations if you don't invest in your people. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Professor Annie, for your interesting case studies of the 3 different companies you spoke about. And it was very enlightening. And yes, as you pointed out, of course, KPMG the Big Four and the others also have a responsibility towards sustainability, and I think when they do audit, now even the financial institutions have to make sure that they only lend to companies which are moving towards ESG compliant, I mean, and you rightly said about transitioning. It is not possible to overnight move from brown to green, but we have to transition maybe from brown, light green, and dark green. So those were some useful tips, and thank you very much. And now we will move to our third speaker, Datin Sri Sunita. She's the chairman of the Climate Governance in Malaysia, which is a Malaysian chapter of the World Economic Forum for Sustainability. And she's the chairperson of Dutch Lady Industries. We'll hear her story of how her role as a corporate director in different companies and what they are playing their role in sustainability.
Thank you, Datuk Vasiha. So today I'm only going to speak about climate governance, because I do view that this is an existential crisis and everyone needs to be sufficiently climate literate to be part of a smooth transition. So firstly, what is this all about? We are on the verge of hitting a tipping point of 1.5 degrees of warming. We have a more than 50% chance of hitting this in the next few years. And the majority, if not every single scientist, is in agreement that this tipping point is going to result in irreversible breakdown of many of our ecological systems that we take for granted. And this is especially important for this part of the world, which is going to be disproportionately affected by rising sea levels, and also because Malaysia is one of only 17 countries of mega biodiversity in the world, because we have a long marine coastline, so we also have a great amount of marine biodiversity. So that is the what. And then the why. Why should we care about this? How is this going to affect us? Everything that we do depends on an extraction of resources. And we are also an exporting nation. So we are extracting our natural resources for customers who are not paying full value for ecosystem services which are being provided. Now this is a problem because the earth simply cannot sustain both population growth and growth in GDP. It is simply not sustainable. So we are an exporting nation in a region which is the factory for the world, and in a region which is addicted to fossil fuels. And the narrative that we tell ourselves is, for example, that this is a problem of the global north. They created this and they can get us out of this very easily. Another narrative is that of intergenerational equity, that you will have young people in your household or who are working for you who will think it is you older people who have created this problem and you need to get us out of this problem. A third narrative is that all of us can be part of this ecosystem of solutions if we all pull our weight and we all act together. And so that's what I want to speak about, because there is huge momentum already taking place right now by allocators of capital, for example, institutional investors or bankers. Institutional investors, there's at least $130 trillion of assets that are looking for sustainability initiatives that they can back. Basically, businesses who are going to help us make a smooth transition to this warmer world. Bankers also either want to bank a green company or the transition from brown to green. Regulators are understandably very nervous. The prudential regulator, like Bank Negara, is worried about the systemic risk on the financial system as the domino effect takes place. Capital markets regulators like Securities Commission and Bursa are very worried because capital markets are forward-looking, and at some stage investors are going to start pulling this risk forward into valuations. And this is a pivot that takes a long time to make. It doesn't just happen overnight. So governments are anxious. Every single government in the world has committed to promises made in Paris and in Glasgow last year. Consumers are starting to choose products, services, solutions which are better for the environment. And of course, your staff, especially younger members of your staff, are looking for this sort of thought leadership. So then the how. We have a spectrum of what we can do. You can start off by just measuring your baseline and benchmarking, perhaps even setting targets as to where you would like to be compared to your peers. You might want to explore scenarios because there's no roadmap as to what's going to happen in the future. So you might want to see, based on these many scenarios, where is my business going to be? And this is a responsibility of businesses who operate under a social license from society. And last of all, of course, there are many businesses who are seizing the opportunity and who are embedding sustainability into their very DNA. It's not just for the purposes of reporting and disclosure, but that they really want every single business decision to be colored by sustainability priorities. So this is a very important journey that your staff and your competitors want to make. And so this is something that businesses in the post-pandemic era need to think hard about. Back to you, moderator.
That was very quick. Anyway, she touched on the whole ecosystem of that. The responsibility lies with everybody, including the consumers, the investors, the institutional investors, and then the intergenerational aspects. You know, it's not just the elder people or the younger people. We all have a role to play in the ecosystem to make sure that we have the ESG in place. Thank you. Next in line is Roshan Thiran. He's a leadership development guy, well known in Malaysia for leadership development. And we will listen to Roshan's story of how leadership in future is going to combine with the sustainability. Maybe you can tell.
Sure. Yep. So, you know, I spent many years in my early formative life with General Electric, traveling around the world, mostly in Europe, and then I spent a lot of time in China in the early, in the 90s, and saw a lot of change and transition. And then I came back to Malaysia to run a business and did a turnaround. And what was interesting is many of the lessons I taught, you know, turning it into the best in the world would be applicable today, may not necessarily translate as it is. I spent, right after that, I spent a lot of time in leadership development with GE, Johnson & Johnson, and today with Leadonomics. And one of the things I think we tend to get wrong is that a lot of things that have happened is not caused by the pandemic. It is really accelerated by the pandemic. And just, you know, if we step back in history, let's just, if you step back, say, 120 years ago, and I think it's quite an interesting analysis. If you step back about 120 years ago into 1890, you see one of the most interesting times in history. You see sort of radios come in, cars start to come in, aeroplanes were invented in 1903. You see telephones, a whole bunch of things, TVs in the early 1900s, and a whole bunch of things started to get invented. And it started to create actually quite interesting scenario. It is supposed to herald in the great time of innovation, the great time of hyper-growth. But, you know, you fast forward into the 1912s, 1915s, it created World War I. And then, of course, they had, similar to us, the Spanish flu, our pandemic, which they had. And then in 1920s, even though they had great innovation, you know, there was electricity, there was light bulb, there was so much productivity, it created the Great Depression and then World War II. And finally, in 1945, is when you started to see things started to kick in, and there was a time of peace, relatively good times for the next 30, 40, 50 years. Until 1990s, where the Berlin Wall fell, and then you had the internet, and you had all these things come about. And then, of course, we have our pandemic in the last couple of years. But really, what was hypergrowth, change, all these great innovation actually creates what we call a time of transition, a time of unease. So while it's great to have cars, but they were replacing horses, and you need car lanes, and you need petrol stations. And of course, there were a few billionaires like the Rockefellers of those times who said, oh, I get it, I need to control the oil supply because of cars, so let's do that. And Standard Oil and billionaire, right? And then, of course, the JP Morgan say, oh, looks like it's going to be a whole different world, and let's control banking. And those guys today exist in the form of Bezos and Zuckerbergs and so on. But I think the problem is that most of the world don't understand this transition. And so there's a writer called Friedrich Nietzsche. In the 1890s, he wrote a book, and he wrote that, these 1890s and these 1900s are a great time of innovation, but there's a problem. It's going to be war, and all kinds of bad things are going to happen because we don't have the sixth sense. And when he wrote in this book about the sixth sense, he said the sixth sense is not about feeling and hearing and the ability to sort of see things, but it's that sixth sense of understanding the context of the age. And I think we are in the same predicament today. Most of the leaders in this world today do not understand the context of this age, including the leadership, political leadership in many countries like the US and so on and so forth. We don't get it. So the easiest thing to do is to go to war, is to go into this whole sort of era, is when I don't understand the context of the age, I cannot lead, I cannot teach, I cannot do, and I cannot get things done in this context. And my take is that if you look at this age, right, it's not a digital revolution alone, because we also have a physical revolution that's happening with automation, 3D printing, and a whole bunch of automation happening in manufacturing and other places. We also, with driverless cars, we also have a biological revolution with the genome mapping project with David Sinclair and the work of extending people's lives. So you've got, at the same time, there's this digital revolution. And it's easy to sugar, it's a blockchain, it's this, it's that. But it's three different revolutions happening simultaneously in an integrated manner that's causing industries. I come from GE, right? And it was sad to see GE disappear in the last, next year I think it crumbles and becomes three entities. But to see a 125-year-old company just disintegrate because of complexity, because you had one leader with 15 industries, and you just can't, because of the complexity of all these different things, including sustainability, right? Including ESG and all these things, right? It's all merging together and all crashing together in a beautifully, almost unorchestrated manner, right? And the leader, right, if you want to lead in this age, in this new era, you need to understand the context of networks. You need to step back and be able to see these integrated and this sort of coalition or crashing of different pieces, different dynamics, make sense of it, and then be able to set standards. You see, 1945, what was great is the end of the war there was United Nations, there were standards, and say, here's standards, here's governance, here's processes, here's how we're going to rule, here's how we're going to divide, here's how we're going to manage this whole thing. Today, we still have not come to the point of understanding what Bitcoin or what crypto is and what all these different things are, that we just are not able to govern, not able to set standards. So I think it's still too early for me. I in the last couple of years, I've transitioned into technology significantly, trying to understand this space, trying to build for this space, trying to lead in this space. And it's not easy because it's an ever-changing space. But at the same time, I think if we do not start to understand the context of age, we will never be able to grasp. Give a very simple example for leadership. In the last 4 years ago, my official title in my company was changed from CEO to coolie. All right, so we had this discussion with all my leaders, and for those of you, it's a derogative Indian word, coolie, K-U-L-I in Malay and C-O-O-L-I-E, right? And so this is my whole leadership team. We talked about it, and we said, look, that's your job, right? Then we said, yeah, okay. And so officially, you can, afterwards, if you come and get my business card, you'll see I have two. I'll give you my coolie card. But the reason why we did that is that we started to understand that in the past, leadership was very powerful, not because they led very well. It's because they had access to information. So the guy at the top always had Reuters, Bloomberg, and a host of information coming to him or her. And so whenever a decision had to be made at the bottom of a sort of an organization, they always had to check in, because this guy was the holder or she was the holder of all the other information and could make the best sort of decision. Today, at the bottom of my organization, when somebody wants to make sort of a decision, they probably know their processes the best in their space, not the leader. I have to go and try and understand what you do and who's your customers and what's the issue, right? Now, they also can Google, can access as much information if they want to about anything. There is almost no secrets that are out there anymore. And if they were to do this and be taught how to do this in a manner that makes sense, they become decision makers. So the leader doesn't need to make decisions. So the org chart should be flipped over, right? The leader should be at the bottom of the org chart, and our job is to hold the organization accountable to the vision, to the direction, to the end goal. And our job is to service our teams, is to provide support, mentoring, coaching, facilitation, and enabling them to succeed. And so our job is not what it was, the big do-all and end-all. It's not the traffic cop, not the decision maker, but a facilitator, a servant almost, which is why the title changed. And there are many other aspects, and this is driven by the fact there is complexity. And because of complexity, every single person in your organization needs to be an expert in the space that they own. And this caused fundamentally huge shifts in structure, in culture, in alignment across your organization. But I don't think many organizations get it yet. And you won't get it until you understand the context of that age. And then you can build your organization, your whatever you lead, accordingly to the context of the age. So my 2 cents, I think we are still in transition, so it's hard to set standards, but we need to understand this transition, that we are in a time of transition, and we need to sort of get a sense of how to move along and enable and empower your organization to go with the transition. You know, if you have a wave blowing that this in a certain way, you just cannot stop that wave. You have to go with it. But you need to be able to know that at the end, when you reach the end destination, you are able to successfully have this wonderful environment where you will thrive in and not suffer. Thanks.
Thank you, Roshan. He had a very nice story of historical context of how inventions and from the First World War right up to now, things have transitioned to where we are now. And I like his concept of being a coolie or a servant. I hope he can convince our political leaders to think that way. And last but not least, we are going to have Professor Dr. Chin Yusin, who has a very impressive CV, and I have never seen anyone in my life who is so well informed and educated lifelong in his career. And we look forward to your presentation, Professor Dr. Chin.
Thank you, Datuk. I met you many times already. Okay, today I'm going to talk about this 2 things only because of short of time. One is about corporate innovations and corporate governance. I think these 2 are very important during the pandemic and post-pandemic. First thing, people always talk about change or die. But to me, change is not good enough. Because change, you just change for something. But you change to something, maybe many people are doing the same thing. So to me, innovate is more important. What do I innovate? Innovation. Innovation, that means you do something different. In terms of maybe your products got different features or different qualities, or your marketing strategies are different for other people, or your processes or your operation are different. The ultimate aim is to make your company more competitive, and you raise the productivity and cut down the costs. That's the most important thing. For a business, you must be able to survive first, then only you can think of grow. Without able to survive, then you cannot grow. So this is very important. So innovation to me is more important than change. Change, you can change to something, a lot of people doing the same thing. Like you're selling Me Too products. Me Too product means everybody's selling the same product. During the, during this pandemic, a lot of people selling gloves also. Because the whole world is in shortage of gloves, you see, that time. But in order to survive, to compete effectively, you must sell something different. You must be able to differentiate your products in terms of features, in terms of other things. That means once the people think of your product, you must be able to think of your name, like Cupcake, like this Lux. All these people is something like become the branded name already. People don't say, I go and eat burgers. People say, I go to McDonald's or go to KFC. KFC is a representation for fried chicken already. I mean, you can do something like that. The company sure can make money because something like your product has become the catch-hold name of the industry already. So I think innovation is very important. How to innovate? That is a question a lot of people need to ask, because to innovate or to come up with different ideas involve a lot of risks, you see. So for a company to encourage people to be more innovative, I think I got some example to show to you. For example, 3M. You know 3M? They used to make these adhesive products. So actually this post-it note, this product is made by this scientist of 3M. Because 3M got very different corporate culture. They encourage their staff to spend 15% of his time just to think of all sorts of ideas, how to improve the processes, how to improve their products, how to improve their marketing strategies, all sorts of things. Each department have to come up with different ideas so that they can come up with an innovative idea. That's why these 3M got many innovative products. Another good example is Sony. You know Sony, how this the co-founder of Sony come up with the idea of Walkman, this Akio Morita. At one time he went to US, he saw this, all the black men carry a big radio and walk around and dance and sing. So after he come back, if he can make this radio, make a more compact kind of radio, then it's better. Then you just carry the Walkman, then you walk around like that. So that's why how people can come up with ideas. We see something different, then he can come up with new products. I mean, so not everybody have this kind of mindset, you see. That's why you need to train your staff or your people. You must dare to be different. You want to be innovative. You try to be a normal person, then you cannot be innovative. You must be somebody different. Then only you can come up with innovative products. So I think this is part of this innovation. Innovation, the first thing, the corporate culture must be able to accept risk-taking. And then the corporate culture also must be able to accept failures, because you want to come up with new ideas or new products, there must be a lot of failures, you see. So a company must be able to tolerate this, because if you don't try now, eventually you could be phased out, because as I say, you don't innovate, you will die, you see. I mean, especially during this time, during pandemic, a lot of people forced to be digitized. If they don't go into digital business or don't digitize their business, they cannot survive, because you can't have close contact with your customer. You have to go by this what I call digital way of reaching your customers. So sometimes that's why you can see many businesses or big companies, they fail because they fail to innovate. So I think this is the first part of this corporate innovation. The second part is about the corporate governance, because you can innovate, but you cannot govern the company properly, also you end up in failure. That's why these two things must go hand in hand. Innovations and this corporate governance must go hand in hand. What do I mean corporate governance? Corporate governance is how you control a company, how you supervise your people, how they work. All these things is very important, because how your staff work is a reflection of the style of the CEO also, because how your staff behave is exact reflection of the style of the CEO, because staff always follow the style of CEO one. That's why how you can govern your staff is very important. So you look at this very good corporate case. This Nick Rickson, everybody know about him. He bankrupt this the oldest merchant bank in UK, Baring Bank. Why this failure occurred? Because this Nick Rickson, nobody supervised him. He can simply go and speculate on this index, or this Tokyo Nikkei index. And then the losses, all this, he can cover up himself because nobody check on him, because there is no proper corporate governance and there is no check and balance. He himself decide everything, and the account also done by him. There's a reason why a good company like Baring Bank can fail just because of one person. This is a very bad example of corporate governance. So I think for this corporate governance is very important for the survival of a company also. No matter how, the company, if there is no proper system or no proper corporate governance, a company will fail also, because once a person make a serious mistake, the whole company just go bankrupt just like that. So it's very funny that Baring Bank, with more than 100 years old, can fail just like that only because of one person. Of course, previously he make a lot of money because speculative. Speculative can make a lot of money, then you can lose the money also very fast because it's only speculate on the index. So sometimes you can make a lot of money. That's why the company so used to him make so much money. Maybe he can make 10 million pounds just by one deal. That's why the company tends to place trust on him, you see. But I think in every company, you cannot just place trust on any person. There must be a proper system. There must be proper corporate governance in order for the company to survive very long time. Okay, I just want to share with you some of the what I call 4 O's for failure of a company. This is very, very useful for all the businessmen. Why a company will fail? First thing, over borrowing, or over gearing. During about 3,000 years ago, there was a Chinese god of merchant. He always say, if you have 100 million capital, you can only borrow up to 50 million only. You cannot borrow more than that. That means your gearing only 0.5. You cannot go. Nowadays, you can see a lot of companies, their gearing is 2-3 times more than their asset, you see. So that's why a company can fail. This god of merchants, you always say you won't fail, or it's very unlikely that you will fail if you only borrow 50% of what you have. But you follow this US way of doing things, they will try to encourage you to borrow money, because their CEO performance is based on how much money they make, based on borrowing, not the asset, you see, because they are based on the return on what asset is, or ROI, return of investment. So that's why they keep on borrowing and don't care, because they are, after all, they are what I call their job only maybe lasts for 1-2 years only, maybe at most 2-3 years. That's why they don't really bother about the long-term effects. See? So I think this over borrowing is always caused the failure of many companies. Second thing is over expansion. During pandemic time, some businesses are doing very well because see, maybe it's a time for them to expand. But sometimes you expand too much, and because it's not every day is a shiny day, you see, because business, there's a cycle one, you see. So you expand too much, you think that I got 1 branch, I can make 1 million, 2 branches, I can make 2 million, 3 branches, I can 3 million, but the calculation is simple, but come to actual reality, is not so simple as that, you see. That's why over expansion also caused the failure of many companies also. And third thing, over borrowing, over expansion, and overspending. Overspending also caused the failure of a company, because you spend too much. Let's say you earn only, your revenue only 1 million, but you spend 2 million. How can you survive? That's why many company fails, because of these 3 O's. Another O I would say is over controlling. Because over control is no good for innovation. That's why I would say you want a company to properly grow, to expand your company, or to become more competitive in the market, you cannot over control the staff, so that that means the staff cannot come up with innovative ideas, or you have to give them some time for them to think. That's why a lot of this top management, 20% of their time only do the administration work. 80% of time they should spend on thinking on how to make the company more competitive. But most of the time, the CEO, 80% of the work are doing the administrative work. Only 20% of their time is on thinking. That's why many these company fail because of that. There's another 4O for success. I must say this 4O also because talk about failures is not good enough without talking about the success formula. Another 4O for success is over the own capital. That means you use your own capital, the chances for you to fail is very less because you don't borrow money. A lot of time you look at many these listed company, why they fail? Because over borrowing, because they are, you look at our super dynamic, you look at this Sapura, Sapu, everything. So that's why you see they Sapu all the debts only and not the money. That's why they fail, because of over borrowing, and they don't use their own capital. I think this Western management way of doing business, I think, have to be reconsidered. I think we have to take into consideration the Chinese way of doing business to make your company more, longer. So that because the US always believe in borrowing money, because you know their CEO performance is based on borrowing, so the return on investment. So they borrow more money, and the capital, not so much capital, but you borrow money, but you can to show that the CEO is very, very effective and very competent. You see. The second thing about success is all customers, especially during the pandemic times. Your old customer is the one that really can help your company to go through. Without old customers, I think during pandemic, everybody is suffering the time. Very difficult for you to survive. That's why old customers are very important. The other two, old is your old partners. That means those partners who cooperate with you to start the company together during the bad time and during the good time, never leave you. That one I would say the old partners are. The one that really can help you to survive during the pandemic time or during the crisis time. These are very important. And lastly, your old staff are also very important, because many staff, when the company is doing well, they will stay with you. When the company is not doing well, they are the first one to leave you. So the old staff also very important for the survival of the company. Okay, thank you very much. I think my time is over already.
Thank you, Professor Dr. Chin, for taking us through the innovation, the importance of innovation and governance, and how if the companies want to survive, they have to be very mindful of gearing, expansion, not to be overspending, and also not over-controlling, and the importance of reflection in companies. So provide enough time for the staff to reflect, and the old partners, old staff, old customers, all should be maintained. That's the relationship networking. Now, how much time do we have from the 5 minutes? Okay. Any questions from the floor? We'll give priority to the floor, or if there is any question from the online, no questions. Anybody wants to ask any question from the floor? We have 5 minutes. If you have no questions, then I will ask each one of the speakers to give the last word before we conclude. No questions? Okay, we'll start with similar. So, Shazali, could you give a summary of 1 minute of your presentation, and then we'll go to Professor Annie, and then we'll go around here. Yes. Are you there?
Am I on the screen?
Yes.
I see a blank. Okay, I see a blank screen on my screen, so I wasn't sure. Okay, to me, I think it's straightforward. The important thing is your employees. To move forward, I think we need to do two things: understand your own business, and to understand the needs of the employees. Because without employees, you cannot service your customers. Although customer is king, but if we don't take care of our employees, we don't take care of the internal controls that we have within the organization, we will not be able to function as a company efficiently and effectively to service our clients and customers. That's my 1 minute. Thank you.
Professor Eniko, now is your turn.
Sure. Yeah, thank you very much. Actually, I love this panel tremendously, and I think Datin Siri hit it on the nail. To be a steward leader, we should always be asking the what, the why, and the how. And I think we have many great Asian stories in our midst, and we should be in the process of collecting all the wonderful best practices and share it in conferences like this. Thank you.
I love the idea of steward leadership, not just servant leadership, but also steward of the environment. And this is a role that every single one of us can play, that we can all step up and within our spheres of influence, make a significant difference. So be part of this ecosystem of solutions.
Thank you. Roshan?
Sure. So I think maybe just a practical sort of insight to leave. I think the world is very complex, and I think many of us alone cannot figure it out. And I think this is where we, I think what everyone is saying, the importance of employees, the importance of enabling them and empowering them, but also partnering with them to enable you to, whether it's to take your organization to become a lot more sustainable, to be a lot more ESG friendly, and all these other things. I think it's going to be a partnership in the future, not an employment. And it's not just partnership with people you know under your payroll, right? It's the gig world. It's all these different partnerships, and until we can really fathom what it means to partner, we really cannot grow our organizations and really take our organizations to the next level. So I think partnerships are going to be the way forward.
Dato'?
I think for a company to survive longer, you must have this crisis mentality. That's why Chinese always say, your wealth cannot last beyond 3 generations. Why they cannot last beyond 3 generations? I think mainly because there is no crisis mentality. Because during the founding period, the founder tend to be very hardworking because they don't have money, they have to struggle. Come to 2nd generation, the son, maybe they still can see the father struggling. When you come to 3rd generation, practically, they don't see any suffering. They only see all the prosperity. That's why if a person didn't undergo any crisis, eventually they cannot handle the kind of pressure when really they themselves to face the kind of pressure. So that's why I say crisis mentality is very important for not only for family but also for company. Very important, because during the good time you must think of the worst time. That's why innovation is very important. You must always try to do something differently from other people. Always try to be few steps ahead of other people. If not, eventually people will catch up with you. Because you don't innovate, other people will innovate, you see. You cannot just stand there and wait for other people to catch up with you. That's why another thing, crisis mentality also very important. Because you always must think that don't think that now is good time, then everything should be good later on, you see. But life is not so simple like that. For a company also the same. Your product can sell very well now. Later on, doesn't mean that you can sell like Nokia. Last time, Nokia was doing very well. They are selling this handphone. They are the pioneer. But where is Nokia now? No more. That's why even a very competitive company, if they don't innovate, they don't change according to time or try to be more attentive to the environment, later on they will be phased out also. Thank you very much.
Thank you. I think we had such a distinguished panel, and if we give them each 15, 20 minutes or even an hour, they will be able to give us more input. But unfortunately, in conferences like this, we have very limited time, so they have to comprise sort of whatever they have to say in 8 to 10 minutes. So let's give a round of applause to all our speakers for today. And thank you.